All right. Hello, everybody. Live from Denver. It is Friday night. Let us make, yep, we are all good in the hood. I am joined by my wonderful wife, Melissa.
Hello.
For another episode of Critical Conversations. Hey, everybody. My critics out there, I am more than happy to welcome you to another live show. What a week. What a week this has been. We, last night, saw friends for the first time in a year.
In person, yeah.
In person, yes. We have been doing Zoom game nights and Zoom chats and Zoom meetups. And now we're back to having friends who are friends in the real world, that you can touch and feel. So that was quite nice. That was quite a nice experience. Hey everybody, welcome and hello. I'm so glad to see all of the usual suspects here. Okay, so we've got some things to talk about this week. We have some. Did I give everybody hugs? You bet I did. You bet I did. It was Hug Fest Orama is what it was last night. Mm-hmm. There were group hugs. There were individual hugs. There were little group hugs. Anyway, there was yes, absolutely.
There was so much hugging.
Exactly. Nice. What's the deal with Leah Remini? I don't know, Tracy. You'll have to clarify that question. I don't know what you mean by that. Okay, so if there's some controversy with Leah right now, I don't know about it.
Yeah.
But do let me know. So, we're going to talk about tolerance this week. I got a couple things to say, really just kind of one big point to make about it, but I wanted to hear from you guys on it. And by the way, call-in line is 984-214-4154, and I do see that we have a caller in the queue, so we are going to get to him in just a moment. But first, as we are wont to do, and as I am so desperate to get to you, we've got 7cam. Yes, here it is. Here is our little bundle of furry love. Hashtag 7thewondercat. I hope one day to be able to actually get that trending on Twitter. Life goals, first world problems. Anyway, yes. So this is our little 7. Now this was caught in the living room in a otherwise unguarded moment. He was just chilling and was comfortable with me sitting there with the camera on him. A rare event, but we are happy that he was. So that's our little guy. And then I see here. Thank you for the compliments on our little guys here. Yes, Leah is definitely still working on stopping the Church of Scientology, if that's who you mean by them, Tracy. She's got a podcast that she puts out routinely with Mike Rinder, and they are interviewing people and talking to former survivors, other cult people, like I do with my podcast. You get, lots of people on from lots of different activities. And Leah's very much still on the front lines on this, as far as I know. She's also gone back to school herself. I'm not sure what she's planning on doing with that, but she is going back for her. Actually, I think first time ever, like me, we say we're going back to school, but we never went to university. We never went to college. She didn't. She actually dropped out of school, I believe, 8th grade or high school, 9th grade. I think she was mid when she said, yeah, I'm out of here. And she stopped doing that and started going to work. So, yeah. All right. Hey, fellow Tigiakians. Okay, good. So glad I could address that. Social justice law degree. That's interesting, Christina. Interesting. Okay, good. All right. Now, let us go ahead and get to the calls, because this is primarily a call-in show where we get to talk to you. So let's see. I think we have David on the line here. Let us see. Hello.
Hello.
Hey. How's it going, man?
Hello. Yeah, pretty well. Yeah. Very interesting topic today. Actually, there's two, I think, quotes that are very relevant to this. The first was Swami Chakrabarti talking in the Oxford Union on the motion this House believes free speech always includes the right to offend. Two of the speakers in opposition were absolutely god awful. I mean, there's no other way around it. But Chakrabarti was the closing for the proposition, obviously, and she said, well, we all love human rights, including freedom of speech. We love our own rights. It's other people's that are a bit more of a problem.
Yes.
Exactly.
It's the root.
Yes.
I think it's the root of the problem.
Yeah, it's all the other people. I would tolerate them a lot more if they would just agree with me.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I would be having debates in Oxford during this early nascent cultural war, which thankfully, one way or another, hasn't been going, I don't think, too badly for the forces of reason in Oxford compared to other universities even today. And people were like, but what about self-censorship? I said, it's not self-censorship if other people are making you do it.
That's true. That's true. That's clearly the exact opposite of self.
Yeah. In that same debate, Peter Hitchens was the first speaker, the third speaker in total to not say the word fuck on the floor. And he said that I don't want to foul the air with words like that, but that is a matter of conscience and morals and my own personal preference. It has nothing to do with somebody else's right to do it. And that's what self-censorship is all about.
Yeah.
Whenever you want to do something and you think better of it. I think the other very relevant quote on this was actually from Antonin Scalia in the flag burning judgment, where he said, if I were a king, I would ban flag burning because I think it's extremely offensive and disrespectful. But I am not a king, I am a judge.
Exactly.
And as a judge, I have to decide whether the First Amendment applies, and regardless of whether I like it, it does.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And that is key to this, is principle over emotion, over ego.
Yeah. I mean, I find it rather ironic that Scalia, who, I mean, I quite like him, but a lot of people don't. But I find it ironic that Scalia is the one who said this, and John Paul Stevens, the liberal icon, his dissenting judgment was basically, it's disrespectful, said in far too many words.
Right. And that's the thing, is a matter of individual taste and decision. And you're absolutely right that being offended is a consequence of speech. It is not, it's a consequence of living, actually. And that's just kind of one of those facts of life that we need to, you kind of have to put your big boy pants on and realize that in order for us to have a free society where anybody gets to express themselves, that means anybody.
Right.
And that means people who you don't agree with, Yep. So.
Yeah. I find it rather interesting. I mean, even people talking about let's just censor the far right and it'll stop at the far right. I mean, the slippery slope fallacy isn't always a fallacy. Slopes can be very slippery in practice. They really can.
Yes.
Because what ends up happening is, so sure, you've censored the Nazis. Sure, you don't want to listen to Nazis, of course. But then what happens 10 years later when all the Nazis are gone and when people start to forget they exist? Well, two things happen. One, people no longer know a Nazi when they see one, and they no longer know the threat that they pose. That starts to get memory hold or forgotten. And then what happens? Are people suddenly content? No, they're not. We get a new left-right paradigm where the idea is next. The idea is closer to the center,
right,
further to the right, are now considered the far right. So let's censor them, and so on, and so on, and so on. Jeremy Waldron made this point in an article called The Right to Do Wrong in Journal of Moral Philosophy. And he said that once we take the bad away, what will happen is that aspersions get cast on the neutral. He divides actions into the good, the neutral, and the bad. Once you take out the bad, what happens is not that everybody's going to live in harmony. It's that the aspersions get cast on the neutral, and somebody else's objective list, what they believe to be objective list of a good, start to get forced upon people because now the neutral is considered more bad because the bad isn't there.
Right. You're referring, I think, to what we call the Overton window. That's related to that?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's absolutely related to that.
Yeah.
Yes. This is from the 1970s, I believe.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I find it rather ironic that Jeremy Waldron, the same author who wrote A Right to Do Wrong, then published a book called The Harm and Hate Speech.
Huh. Yeah. See, that's the tricky thing.
The same guy.
I know it is a tricky subject, man. Because you do want people to be able to express themselves. You want to be able to have a society where we can tolerate a wide spectrum of ideas, a wide spectrum of views on things. And you kind of think, if you're a classic liberal, that, or if you have, enlightenment values, that this is a good thing. And the crazy thing about,
I would say it is.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about life before the Enlightenment is that's not how people thought.
Nope.
And that's not how people acted. And we've had centuries we can go back and look at of enforced belief, persecution over religion, politics, ideology, etc.
Yeah.
I mean, we've already had the test case for intolerance in every society.
And we are learning nothing. We have learned nothing.
Well, I'm going to push back on you a little bit on that. I'll push back a little bit because, and the reason I'm going to push back is because, and this is something I've come to really appreciate sort of newly this last week, just because of some of the study I was doing on spiritually abusive groups and stuff. I was having to dive into some deep history, and I want to appreciate that the Enlightenment and the Age of Reason and what came out of that chaos of Western European warfare and cultural melee and aristocracy versus the merchants versus the peasants and all of that were a set of ideas that we actually did learn something really important from. And it was so important that we actually have created an entirely new culture and social structure because of those ideas. And they have allowed us to have a freedom of thought and belief. And this conversation is only happening because we did learn those things. And so I agree with you that
perhaps I was too sweeping in my statement.
That's the only reason I push back. It's the only reason I did, because I want to acknowledge progress.
I'm referring to our current cultural moment, which is rather dangerous. And again, it's unfortunate that it's true, perhaps, but the majority of it is coming from the left. The Foundation for Individual Rights in Education has been tracking disinvitation on college campuses for a number of years now. And for every disinvitation that has come from the right, there have been at least 2 coming from the left. This is data-driven when people say this. It's not like a bunch of right-wing culture warriors. It's driven by the data. And there was a study done, I think it was 2 years ago now, before the midterms, where liberals were asked to say what they think conservative policies were and why they think conservatives believed them, and conservatives were asked to do the same for liberals. Obviously, this is only one study. We don't know if it's been replicated, but in that particular study, the conservatives were the younger conservatives, for instance, were far more likely to get the answers right as to what the policy positions were, and to be able to describe why their opponents believed what they did. By contrast, a small but significant minority, particularly of young liberals, A, got it wrong, and B, took extremely uncharitable views of why the other side believes what they believe. And it's something that I said in my something that I said to some of my older students in China was, we're talking about heroes and villains in fiction. My favorite is The Elusive Man from Mass Effect 2. Don't know if you played Mass Effect, but
I'm sorry. Could you repeat? Sorry, I'm going to cut you off there.
Sure.
Could you repeat that? I didn't quite make out what you were just saying about what you were teaching.
Okay, I was teaching about heroes and villains because we're doing modules on fiction and stuff.
Oh, modules on fiction. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. My favorite villain is the elusive man from Mass Effect 2. I don't know if you played Mass Effect, but I'm specifically talking about Mass Effect 2. What they did in Mass Effect 3 to the character was absolutely criminal. So what I said to So what I said to them was, here, firstly, he's good looking for his age. He's in his mid-50s. He's good looking for his age. He's charismatic. And but most importantly, he wakes up every day thinking, what good am I going to do today? He is absolutely convinced that what he is doing is good.
Right.
And in Mass Effect 2, he's the one that saves the main character from certain death at the start of the game. Like, he's not a one-dimensional villain either. He is doing some good and a lot of evil, but everything he does, he is convinced it is good. And I think the vast majority of people are like that. They hold the positions that they hold because they believe them to be in the best interests of society at large.
That's exactly, I agree with you 100% in what you just said. And in fact, that was exactly one of the points that I was going to make here today about this. So again, you are wonderfully in parallel with my thinking on this, and I really appreciate that. Seriously, it's quite good, you know, because it's true. Who's the villain of their own story?
Right.
Not very many people.
Nobody.
Right?
No.
How could you be and survive in the world?
Serial killers.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, how how could you?
I mean, the big one's obviously Carl Panzram. Whenever there was the fucking death penalty protesters at his own execution, and he yelled to them to fuck off, and his only wish was that they all shared one neck so he could strangle it.
Wow.
That's the kind of guy who's a villain in his own story.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, very interesting stuff. Let me ask you one. Let me ask you about something on the topic of the show, because I am curious about your take on this. Because we parallel so well on so many things, I'm interested in where you're going to go with this, and that is the paradox of intolerance. Popper's.
Okay. Well, firstly, yes. Firstly, Popper never said to ban intolerant ideas. What Popper actually said was that if people were being violent in enforcing intolerant ideas, then we have a right to stop them with violence.
Correct.
And that is when he never said to outlaw it. He said that civil society should not tolerate it. He said that civil society should push back on it. But he never said to outlaw it. And also, even if he did, why should an ordinary person care that Karl Popper said it? Who is Karl Popper to the ordinary person? He's a nobody. You're falling right back into an argument from authority fallacy, because that tends to be where the argument ends. People misquote Popper, they say Popper said it, and then they rest their case. And it's like, well, why should I, even if you're right, why should I care?
Yes. Yes, it is amazing how that happens.
It reminds me of there's a couple of ways that I can expand on this. One is there's a play called The Merchant of Yonkers, written by Thornton Wilder. A character called Malachi Stack is doing a monologue, and he said, we've all seen the dragons of purity who insist that nobody has any vices, and what they become the Inquisitor. Everyone will have at least some vices, so take a vice, nurture it, and allow your virtues to groom modestly around it. Rather more interestingly, in my opinion, is Christopher Hitchens' famous speech in Canada on the subject. Who is to decide? Is anybody so perfect that they can decide? And whenever he did it, I think it was 2006, or 2007, and there was complete dead silence. You could have heard a pin drop. But there are too many people today with absolutely no experience of the world who would, if they were honest, put their hands up and say, I am the one that is so good that I can do it. And I think that disturbs me personally.
Well, I agree with you, and I will say that I find it disturbing, but I also find it pretty natural. And I think the reason for that is because exactly as you said, you are dealing with people who are in a stage of development, as we have identified these things, of an almost messianic state of mind. Young people can get there pretty easily, right? They're all about changing the world, making their mark, making their stamp on the world, and changing things as they see is necessary, right? And these little runts have the energy to do it, and that's why you get older and you're like, my God. So
sometimes they're right.
And sometimes they're right.
My aunt was in the Northern Ireland.
That's right.
Yes, my aunt was in the Northern Ireland protest about housing in Northern Ireland when she was like 17, for instance. But a lot of the time, they're wrong as well.
That's correct.
Not every issue is as clear-cut as the housing marches in Northern Ireland were.
That's right. That's exactly right.
What used to happen was the adults in the room said no, and you'll understand when you're older.
Right.
What's happening now, courtesy of Twitter and cancel mobs, is the New York Times boardroom is groveling to its new hires, which is it's very disturbing from a social cultural point of view that these people in their 50s who have done so much for liberal values through their reporting are now groveling at the feet of intolerant people who they've hired from Ivy League, mostly disproportionately wealthy people from Ivy League universities, which I also find very interesting. It's always there was this guy in Oxford, one of the guys leading that Rhodes must fall nonsense. Well, he was talking about how oppressed he is after he went to Manchester Grammar School, which is a $48,000 a year private school.
Right. Right. No, I get you on that. There is a fad. I look at this. I've started to think about this as faddish. I could be wrong, but I believe that that's what we're seeing here with this. That, the mob culture, cancel culture, social media thing, this is all pretty new, but it really is just exacerbating existing human prejudices and biases, right? So I think you're going to see a balance start to kick back against this kind of,
I think we're starting to see one.
I do. I think so too.
Starting.
That's right. Yeah, we are.
And I think to give the orange antichrist his due, I think it started with Donald Trump's executive order on so-called critical race theory. It's like if you read what the executive order said, people said, can you point to one of the 5 things that he wanted to prohibit in training and tell me why it is good? And the answer for the vast majority of people was no. And the executive order has now become the basis for several bills in state legislatures. Now, the First Amendment, there are obviously First Amendment considerations as well.
Right.
I do think that whenever the history of this is written in 10 years' time, that's going to be considered a major moment of people thinking, okay, what can we do to push back?
Right.
And here is a template of something we can do.
Yeah, banning, of course, is thought policing. That never works.
Yeah.
And really, I think that in the spirit of John Stuart Mill, what we really want is better arguments. Yes. And they're out there. They're not even hard to find. I've advocated for them on my own podcast. So I think that battle is happening. The battle of ideas is absolutely raging right now, and the conservative response to, okay, ban it, shut it up, close it down, burn the books. I mean, that's just more bullshit piled on top of bullshit. So that's just going to continue the problem, I believe.
true, but I think there's another side to that argument. I mean, my jury's out on this one. There's another side to that argument, and that is if so-called liberals are cancelling conservatives all the time, and the conservative cancels a liberal back, well, it's like when a machine gun gets invented. One side invents machine guns. The other side just says, oh, no, we're not going to do that. They're too barbaric. Well, they still get mown down by machine guns.
Right.
If the other side says, no, we will make our own machine gun, and now both sides are being mowed down, that's when they have to call a ceasefire and regulate the use of machine guns.
Exactly. Exactly. And let's be clear that canceling somebody in a social media platform or cultural social situation is a very different thing from regulating cancellation through laws that ban things. And I do want to separate those two ideas because they're significantly different activities, you know.
Both are bad ideas.
Both are incredibly bad
I
ideas.
found it rather
but
interesting.
Yeah.
I found it rather interesting in Quillette years ago, where they said inducing somebody's termination through social media should be a civil wrong. And I agree. Honestly, I agree with that. If you have caused somebody to lose their job based on something that's nothing to do with their work, then why should he not be able to recover damages for interference with contract or interference with business? Those are two ideas that exist in British law, but they're not very well defined because there aren't any cases on them. There are probably more problem questions that use potential ideas in law school exams in Britain than there are actual cases. These are not very well defined terms, but they do exist.
Right. Exactly. I get your point on that. I'm, of course, going to default to my, bottom line position on all of that stuff, which is context always matters. And that's why we have, court systems, is so they can break down the context of, was this an injustice to this person? Or in the case of, let's say, you have some guy who really should be in prison. And, so so maybe those business dealings aren't quite as priority as we were thinking they might be. But at the same time, you need those same laws to protect the innocent, so that if somebody's wrongfully accused, that it all comes out in the context, and then the person is, properly restituted if there was damages. So
what I think we really need is laws to discourage people from doing it in the first place. Again, we can't just ban everything, and good luck writing a law that would allow you to ban something as nebulous and ill-defined as that. But the real goal here should be in discouraging people from doing it in the first place, so that we don't have to cure it afterwards.
Exactly. Exactly.
I think before I go, I want to tell you an interesting story about China, actually. 4 times I've asked Chinese students to choose between freedom and unfreedom in different contexts. Every time they have chosen freedom.
Really?
Every time. Yes, it surprised me. So one module we did was on social media. It was on what would be the rules of like a blog or a platform. I gave them 2 options. So I taught this lesson twice with 2 different groups, and I gave them 2 options. The first option was, do not be mean. If you are mean, you will be banned. Option 2, please do not be mean. It is disrespectful. Try to be positive. Repeated disruptors may be banned. Okay, which one do you want? And the first time I asked that question, one girl very nervously put her hand up and said option 2. The second time I taught it, 2/3 of the class put their hands up immediately and said option 2. And I said, well, my opinion is that that's the right answer, because, and I explained this to them and they got it, was, who gets to decide who's mean? You might think that what you said was not mean, but by the time you've said that, you've already been banned for being mean.
Right.
And the uptake of that is that you might have to listen to somebody say something that you think is mean, but you can't ban them. And they're like, so what? I'm like, exactly. Because the very right of them to post a comment that you believe is mean and they don't gives you the right to post a comment that you don't believe is mean, but somebody else does, and not have you get punished for it.
Right. Well, you're definitely highlighting the problem with my problem, certainly with laws on hate speech, because it's the same point. You know, what's mean, what's hate speech. My hate speech isn't your hate speech. So how do we, you know, how are we supposed to? And you'll find if you go into actually the law on this and try to break down how do you define hate speech in an objective, universal way. Good luck, you know. So
without encompassing everything. But
that's right.
For some people, maybe that's the point.
Exactly. Exactly. All right, man. Well, thanks for calling in on this. I really appreciate your views.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great fun.
Yeah, good talk. All right, talk to you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, good stuff. All right, 916-214-4154. Sorry about that. That is our call-in number. Go ahead and use it. We are more than happy to talk to you guys about this. I am seeing commentary about racism and critical race theory and stuff like that. Of course, you guys might have seen my podcast on that issue. I still hold those views. I just don't think racism is the answer to racism, and that's pretty much what I see in critical race theory. However, I will say that on the opposite side of that, critical race theory addresses power differentials, and power differentials are a real thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to say that they're not, or that you know, that you can't have issues with people because of those power differentials. I absolutely believe that that is true. It's empirically obvious. However, to then, you know, take that to this is how our entire society is structured, and this is the lens through which we must view it, and everybody who is privileged are, you know, the equivalent of the oppressors and the bad guys. That's way too generalized a view, far too, you know, it just doesn't allow for any nuance or context. And it sets up a situation, as we have been seeing for the last year and a half, of, I guess, what you might call reverse racism, but I'll just call it racism. Because if you're not supposed to highlight race on this direction, then why are you highlighting it in the other direction? And why is that okay? And there's obviously a much deeper conversation there, but that's my problem with that, and I am fairly intolerant of critical race theory because of my examination of it. It's not just some off the cuff thing. Okay. I will do the best I can with the sound equipment. I am not sure what this is that you are having a hard time hearing. Sorry about that, Lisa. I've invested quite a bit of money in sound equipment, so I'm not really going to do that again, but I will try to fix whatever is wrong here if you guys can't hear us. The phone thing, I've got it maxed out as maxed as I can get the sound on that, and there isn't a better way for me to do that. And I'm sorry if that doesn't come across well, or the sound is broken up. I'm not sure what to do about that particular thing. Yeah, that's a view, Chris. Andrew, America's an economic empire exploiting half the world. Our entire quality of life is based on racism outside our borders. I hear you, and I get the view, and I don't disagree with a lot of the reasoning behind that. I think we have to, you know, balance these things against there are a lot of negatives connected with American imperialism or expansion or colonialism or whatever word you want to use with that. Absolutely. But it's not as black and white as a lot of people seem to be making it out to be. Okay. Anyway, we're not going to get into that conversation right now. What we are going to do, though, is we're going to check back in with 7 first.
Woo.
All right. So let's go to our 7 cam. There he is, the same spot again.
But this time he's got his eyes closed.
Yes. Yeah, he's just kind of kicking it there.
He's shaking it up.
That's right. Oh, there he is.
Oh, he opened his eyes.
Looking around.
Oh, no.
Then he closes them again. That's our little guy. Yes. Yes. All right. Yes. I hear you, Chris. I get it. Okay. So, tolerance. Let me say this. I think there's something underlying intolerance, which we talked about in the call just now, and I want to highlight again because this was sort of experiential for me this week. Diving into some history, diving into some religion. I'm finally just so you guys know, I'm sorting out all the Christian denominations, all the Protestant denominations, and my God, is that a topic. So anyway, doing that for some research for a paper, and in doing this, I was thinking about like what. Okay, let me tell you exactly what happened with me, and then you guys can give me some feedback on this because I'm a little curious what you think. 7 is not celebrating 420. Okay, I get distracted by comments. I got to finish my thought here. So, one thing that happens with me when I start looking at broad swaths of history, especially old history, like pre-enlightenment history, is you get a real appreciation for how good we have it.
Oh, yeah.
Now, right? Like you start compare and contrast with the life of a peasant or even the life of an aristocrat in Western Europe in the Middle Ages or in the in the early modern period, and it was awful. It was god awful. It was a god awful existence. And not only was it a god-awful existence, but it was an existence of so little hope in so many ways. And when they say, life sucks and then you die, now that's just this kind of funny little, life sucks and then you die, hashtag first world problems, For 99% of the people who have ever lived on this planet, any human being, that was their life, Like it's been pretty bad. And it's not just the conveniences of modern technology I'm talking about, although that clearly is part of it. I mean, I kind of really appreciate toilet paper, for example, and being able to drink a Coke out of a can. But even the concept of being able to go to a store and buy things.
Yeah. We don't have to hunt. We don't have to do that.
Right. Prepackaged food.
Yeah.
Clothing. Shelter, like all the wonderful things we have now, right? And this is my problem. And what happens is I start studying this stuff, and then I start comparing it in my I don't know, older person, whatever. I know I'm not old, but older.
The old man inside of you.
Yeah, the old man inside of me starts ratcheting up, right? These kids these days, they don't know how good they have it. If they only knew, and this kind of thing. And how could they be complaining so much? How could they do this? How could they do that, right? And yes, Christina says they couldn't compare themselves to us, so they didn't know how bad they had it. No, they didn't. Actually, I think a lot of them did, because this is a time period when you had, think of all the people you've ever known who've had kids. I'm sure you've known tons of them, tons of people who've had babies. Imagine 1 out of every 5 mothers that you've ever met who had kids dying in childbirth. 1 out of 5, 20%
Jesus.
of them dead because they had a kid, right? No, sanitation was a foreign concept to these people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not to mention, in some regions, upwards of 80% of the kids didn't live past year 1. 80%. 4 out of 5 of your kids are going to die before they're a year old. No wonder people were having so many
12
kids and,
yeah.
trying to have big families and trying to do all this other stuff. And then you have these, this religious template of Catholicism laid over all of this. And then you have the Luther and Calvin and these guys, right? And the Protestant movements and all of this. It was just not a lot of fun. But here's where I'm going with this, is I'm not trying to go on some rant about, Western European history. I'm trying to say, I start getting like these really weird reactions to this as part of my learning of feeling kind of pissed at people now for not appreciating what they have. And that's wrong of me. That's very wrong of me. I shouldn't really be thinking that way. But I had to kind of struggle with this a little bit, and this was actually what ended up becoming a little bit of a problem of tolerance. Oh, good. I see this call in the queue. I'm about to pick it up, but let me finish my point. Is that, see, the rightness trap, it has to do with the rightness trap. That's the note that I made to myself, right? You got to be right. If you have to be right all the time, that's your root of intolerance. That's where that's the psychological element or the emotional element or whatever that generates it, that gets it going. Is I'm right, you're wrong. And it's just sort of zero. And here's the error. Here's the logical fallacy or the error in this kind of thinking is it's zero-sum thinking. If I'm right, you have to be wrong. And if there is one grand lesson that I have learned and really had to struggle to learn, I got to tell you guys, I mean, this is right out of my Scientology background. It's been such a struggle for me to learn that there isn't such a thing as one right way to do things, and that's the only way there is. One right way to think, and that's the only way there is. My ideas are the only right ones, and they're objective truth, and everybody else has it wrong. I've struggled so hard to overcome that brainwashing that was in my head, right? For decades I've been struggling with this. And well, I wasn't struggling with it for decades. I thought I had all the answers. It's trying to unlearn this over the last few years that I've really been struggling, and especially this really came to the fore with the university education, where you are exposed to a broad range of ideas on therapy and recovery, in what coercive control is, and what psychology even is, what it should be, what it isn't, and learning that there's a huge spectrum of ideas out there. And there are rightnesses and wrongnesses, you could say, connected with all of them. There is no perfect idea. There is no perfect method or solution or anything or system. Nothing. It's all got rightnesses and wrongnesses connected with it in varying degrees. And I'm only trying to get this across because this was such an epiphany for me. And even after all these years, after all this talk I've done about critical thinking and about, reason and thinking things through, these little landmines were just keep going off in my head. And I guess what I wanted to share was that it's the struggle to be right, I think, that drives so much of the intolerance in our world.
Definitely.
It's like, I have to be right, and that means, in my mind, you have to be wrong. And that is an equation that is just false. When it comes to the world of ideas, it's so much more nuanced than that. And if you can, and I think that's where we fall down a lot, and I wanted to kind of put all that out there, sort of say that out loud, right? It's tolerance is basically not being a dick. It's like, it's okay that you have independent thinking and that you think your own thoughts.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't have to assert my rightness or my authority or my...
Yeah, you don't have to overwhelm me with your rightness.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's the heart of tolerance. I don't know. Maybe there's something deeper than that, but I really think that's where it comes down to. And yeah. Yeah, Christina, I get it. That's right. Yeah, exactly, Henny. Being right isn't important to the tolerant person. That's the point, right? Is if you can let that go. It's not, knowledge and truth are not zero-sum games. Right? They're not, I've got all the pie and so you get none of the pie. It's just not like that. but I think way too many people think it is, and they're afraid of ideas. They're afraid of difference. They're afraid of change. They're afraid of potential change, and they want to shut everything down, clamp it down, ban it, stop it, hold it down. Right? Don't let it happen. Don't let anybody else find out about this. That could change everything. And why would people be afraid of change? Because they're holding on to what they think is so right, so true, so what must be the most important, ideas or things or beliefs or whatever. And we've just got to let that go. And I think that it's helped. I think it's helped to let these things go if we recognize that it's not a zero-sum game, but that there's an infinity of ideas, that we have 1,000 ideas a day. I mean, there's no shortage of ideas. And I think we run this scarcity or something. We have this idea that ideas are scarce, or truth is scarce, or there's only so much of it, and it has to be mine. And I'm sure there's status mixed up in this too. So anyway, that's kind of the point there. I'm probably overstating it, so I'm going to stop talking now. But that is what I wanted to say for myself about tolerance and some of my own kind of thinking and lived experience about that. Because I was really struggling with this for a few days. I was really pissed at a lot of people. Like, God damn it, don't they know? And then you get into this thinking, and let me just rant about this real fast. I know, but it's my show, so I get to rant. So, let me just say real fast that I am no longer going to contribute to the let's get kids educated on this. They should be taught this. They should be taught that. And the reason why is because the other thing I started thinking about this week, or remembering in real detail in a conversation with somebody, was what I was like in school. and they were agreeing with me because they were just like that too. And if you remembered, I don't know if any of you remember this, but remember sitting in your geometry, history, sociology, or politics class and saying almost out loud, when am I ever going to use this? What am I learning this for? Why are you cramming this down my throat? What possible use does learning the dates of the president's lives, or this war, or this occurrence, or this event, when am I going to need to know this? Why do I need to know this? What possible use is this for me? Anybody, do these words sound at all familiar to anybody else? Because this was my mantra through all of high school. and I look back on that and I think, it's not really rocket science why I didn't retain half or more of my education, is because that was my attitude about it. And then I got in Scientology, and it just reinforced it, as many religions do. Well, you don't need that. You don't need that learning. You don't need that crap.
Well, and I think schools don't always engage kids in the right way. That's a big problem. Because it's just a one-size-fits-all sort of thing in a lot of schools. That's right. We've certainly, this is no statement of perfection on the part of our educational systems. They're pretty messed up. We need to work them over. What I'm talking about, though, is my attitude as a kid. It didn't really matter. I mean, perhaps it did matter, and perhaps a different system would have elicited a different response from me. But the factory line, assembly line kind of educational system that we have, does demand conformity. And if there's one thing that, of course, teenagers are real bad at, it's conforming. Well, they are, and they are. I mean, because they'll conform to what their friends are doing, but they're really bad at conforming to like what adults want them to do.
Yeah. Actually, really good point.
Yeah.
Really good point. Because I was right on board with Scientology, and they were saying things different than what my parents were saying. And that's where things got really interesting, because that's when I joined staff. Anyway, we have got some calls in the queue, so let's go ahead and pick up the first one. Santino? Do I have your name right?
Oh, hey, guys.
Hi, welcome to the show.
You got it, yeah. Italian. I'm listening for Hi, guys. I just wanted to start first by saying thanks, Melissa, for such an awesome show about chronic illness. I think it's just such a really important topic. But, it's one thing to have the facts, but for it to be coming from someone from a personal perspective like that means so much. It has so much more credence. It really resonates with people so much more. And I really do appreciate that you guys did a whole show on that. I hope you do some more. I thought it was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's my first thing. Thanks, Melissa. That was awesome.
Awesome.
And Chris, actually, it's probably for both of you because you guys are, I'm sure, aware of what's going on in Denver. Okay, I'm just gonna say, what's going on in Colorado, guys, with that Love Has Won cult? Like,
oh,
a
yeah,
really strange cult.
yes,
and you know, they're, and I'm trying to keep it on topic as well too, with the idea of tolerance here, right? So
Yep.
Scientology has no tolerance whatsoever, but they do a very great job of covering that up. This crazy group has zero tolerance whatsoever as well, but they're not hiding nothing. Like, they're homophobic, they're racist, they're pro-Trump. They believe Trump was like somehow involved, and Robin Williams was involved in their doctrine. Sounds so crazy, but really, is it any crazier that Robin Williams is a deity as Xenu was a deity? They're both pretty wacky, don't you think?
that's right.
I mean, I would rather meet Robin Williams, but I don't think either of them would get me to him. So
Exactly.
I really want to hear your opinion. What is that? And the group has recently split as well too. There's so much stuff going on with that. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, limited knowledge on it, okay? So I'm going to say that up front. I haven't deep dived on this group, although they are here in Colorado. I believe this is the group whose founder was found dead, mummified or something.
Golly.
She was,
in a very weird way.
yeah, like she'd
very
been,
strange.
yeah, it was very strange. And of course, this was in Colorado, so my ears perked up when I saw the story. I don't know that it's really so different from any other run-of-the-mill, weirdo little cult, but it's interesting on the point of tolerance, because what I want to say on that is that sometimes, in the case of Scientology, you have a group who is trying to go mainstream. They want everybody. So they know that intolerance is the feature, right? And that tolerance is the feature, that you want to be tolerant. You want to be viewed as tolerant. Your description of this group in Colorado is the same as Scientology. Homophobic, very intolerant, very not trusting of outsiders, et cetera, et cetera. But they don't put on a show of that. With this group, intolerance was a feature. They wanted that. They were, they put that out there as, no, this is who we are. We want more like-minded people. And so I guess what I'm saying is that some groups aren't trying to mainstream, if that makes sense. It's a weird little thing, but they like being these these small little groups, right? Not everybody has national aspirations. So I think that's what we're seeing with this little group, is where they actually kind of flip the script and make intolerance or intolerant beliefs or this sort of exclusivity and othering of everybody else an open feature of their activity. And that, of course, is going to attract, its own kind of people.
People who are into that. Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Well, another question around that as well, too, is, and I would imagine, and this is why Scientology is so, as far as trying to be politically correct and in line. But this group is not. They're on YouTube. They're on Facebook. They're on maybe Twitter. I don't know about that. But what are your thoughts around deplatforming a group like this? Like, they should be deplatforming. I mean, it's really obvious what they're doing. They're not even trying. Like, I don't like giving Scientology credit for anything, but at least, they're putting in an effort.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah,
but deplatforming and tolerance, and then people who don't agree with this, like myself or you, should they be allowed to have a YouTube page where they spout their nonsense if it's hurting people? Should they be allowed to, do live streams and stuff like that? Because they are, and they're doing it. And the funny thing is, when they do their live streams, they turn their comments off, and they're like, "We don't want the haters." And I'm like, "You guys hate everyone else."
I know.
Yeah.
It's quite something with that. I am a pretty big opponent of deplatforming in most cases. I believe that the marketplace of ideas should be a populated place where people, and very active, where people are talking to one another and arguing and working these things out. Or not, as the case may be, but still talking, because I think that is a better place to be than exclusion and banning and thought policing, because down that road is a violent result faster.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. For
Yeah.
sure.
Because if you take away somebody's voice, or they think you've taken away their voice, that reduces their options very quickly as to how they feel they can be important or relevant in the world and how they matter. And make no mistake, every single human being thinks they matter. And they should, because they do. Right. They're alive. They're creatures, right? They're alive. They have intelligence and they have a voice. So you don't want to reduce the options. So they get loud in another way. Yeah, you want to corral this stuff with better ideas as best you can. I will draw the line 100% of the time when there is advocated violence, and I mean blatant advocated violence. I don't mean inferences or innuendo, because you can, you can get away with a lot with that, but it also can be that you don't really mean blatant violence, and people can misinterpret you that way. So I want it clear. True. I want it crystal clear.
But I mean, there are videos of the leader before she passed away just recently harming a cat, harming a child.
Oh, no doubt.
There are videos. Yeah. On Dr. Phil, right?
Yeah,
that's why I'm like, should this group even be on YouTube? Should they be trying to reach people? Should they be taken off? That's sort of the other side of the coin. But I do totally agree with you saying deplatforming is not a good idea.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is kind of documented. It's not kind of, it is documented. She's harming a cat. She's harming a child.
Right.
I just feel like there maybe should be a certain degree of accountability around children and animals and stuff like that.
Absolutely. And in fact, if you actually check it out, and I don't know what you know about this, so I'm just saying this to everybody, is the YouTube terms of service and the YouTube rules they directly address all this. I mean, there are some big, wide gaps in what the hell YouTube wants. And they definitely overgeneralize in some of their rules for content creators. I've got all kinds of issues with that. But when it comes to violence, when it comes to kids, when it comes to animals, they are crystal clear. And I think that it's merely enforcing those policies as a private company is the solution to that problem.
Right. So would you just say for things like that makes you feel uncomfortable, I guess the best thing to do is just report as you see, I guess, right?
Exactly. Let the platforms decide. Yeah. They have their terms of service, and they have worked out, how they're going to be as a platform. What I find fascinating, and maybe you'll join me in this, is how these alternative platforms arise. I can't remember all the names of them, but you get these other platforms where we're going to go have freedom of speech. Parler, and these other ones, right? Well, we're going to go have freedom of speech over here. And of course, within a day or two, they're banning people too. Because, because really we're talking about...
Really, that happens, gosh.
Yeah, because we're talking about ideological purity tests rather than actual destructive things. And there is a big, huge difference there. So you'll see me err on the side of caution rather than err on the side of, no, let's get rid of them. You'll see that from me. Yeah. I know that will result in mistakes being made. I'm absolutely aware of that. But like the innocent until proven guilty, I'd rather have guilty people go free than innocent people in jail if I had to have one or the other. You know what I mean?
Certainly, yeah. Oh, well, thank you for opening that up a little bit. I mean, I'm all the way up here in Canada, so when I see these things, I'm like, what is going on down there?
Right. I hear you.
Anyway, again, Melissa, thank you again for that great podcast, and I hope you do more on it.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Have a great night.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. Good. Let's get to our next caller. I believe this is Sheila picking it up here. Hello. You were on.
Hey, Chris, Melissa.
Hi.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Hey. Well, after hearing that last call, I feel like my little nugget is not as worthwhile. But this whole conversation has made me think of a conversation that I had a while ago with a very good friend of mine.
What's that?
Regarding, tangentially, I think like tolerance and perhaps prejudice are linked. And we were talking about why are people prejudice? Like what makes a person intolerant of somebody just based on an intractable feature of their life that they've got no control over?
Yep.
And I think what it comes down to is just that people just make generalizations. They have these fallback ideas, that they're comfortable with holding because they feel kind of immutable, and it's really hard to work around a generalization. I think if tolerance is something that we want to promote, I don't think there's like an idea or lessons other than just like don't make generalizations about people, for the most part.
Yeah. Well, here's the let me not challenge you, because I don't disagree with what you're saying, but let me point something out maybe. The problem in trying to execute that is that we have to think in generalities in order to manage our way through life, because we don't have the brain power to get super specific about every single thing we're dealing with. And I don't say that as though there's no hope. I'm just kind of throwing that out there, that it's a problem because it's in our nature. That's how we think. So it's a big challenge. It's a real big challenge. That's all I'm saying. I'm sorry. I don't mean to push back too hard there.
Oh, no. I don't disagree. I think that our tendency as humans is to categorize things. And so that's what we do. Yeah. But I think maybe we should question our categories, maybe sometimes.
I agree with you.
Definitely.
And that's actually that's it right there, is the questioning. It's the discipline of remembering or keeping it front and center in your mind and practicing over and over again that when you are faced with a situation where your anger is rising, or you feel, this intolerance, this like, oh, I have reasons to hate this person now, start asking questions. Get more specific. Take it out of the generality of what you're thinking, and find out specifically whether the reason you're so angry or have this rising hatred or whatever is legit or not. Because I think you're going to find a lot of the time that it's not. And I think that's building on the advice you're giving there. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh yeah. I think you got it. I think definitely. Yeah.
Cool. Perfect. Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, it really is, and because it does lead to where we need to be focusing, because that overgeneralization you're referring to, that overly broad categorization, is the root of why we have prejudice. And yeah. And it's how we go about categorizing the world, but when we use that to hate on other people, then maybe we're doing it wrong. How's that?
I think that's it, and that's all I had to say. Thanks, Chris and Melissa.
Awesome. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, thank you.
Really appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. Okay, cool. Now, I think I have a couple super chats to acknowledge. Thank you, Roar, just now. Also, Couch earlier. And was there another one that I missed?
I don't know.
Okay, well, I do want to acknowledge those super chats.
See.
Definitely appreciate them. There's the one from Couch.
Yeah,
That's right. That was the one. Okay, good. Anyway, thanks for the super chats, guys. Always appreciated. Okay. Yeah, perhaps public discourse should be controlled democratically, not by billionaires. I would tend to agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bud 123 is kind of nailing it here in terms of the advocating for violence thing. And this is actually one reason why we see certain unnamed politicians running around the country right now saying very, very controversial things about inciting, even outright revolution. I believe that this is very, very borderline, very dangerous talk, and should be watched very carefully. Boy, once you start talking about banning stuff, though, you better be sure. You just better be sure that you think through all the unintended consequences of what you're talking about, because it's easy in the moment. It's so easy in the moment, and it can have such unbelievably dire consequences in the future that you're just not seeing because you're so upset about what's happening in the moment. And this is where the critical thinking thing is so important. And I'm going to keep using the discipline of critical thinking, because I'm trying to get across that it's like getting a black belt in martial arts. It's something you have to practice and practice and practice at. It's not something that comes to you naturally. It just isn't, any more than
being a black belt in jiu-jitsu is something that just comes naturally to people. It doesn't. You know, there are some people who have skill sets that align with that and they learn it more easily. But I've never met anybody who just knew critical thinking coming out of the womb, you know. Okay, we have one other call we're going to take, and then we will wrap up our calls. I know we're a little over time, but here we go. Hello, you are on. Is this Chris?
Hello, Chris.
Hi.
This is Travis. I have a Scientology question.
Okay, we got Scientology in the house. What's up, Travis? What you got for me?
Yeah, and also hello to you, Melissa. I want to include her.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Hello.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, when you were part of Scientology, did you ever hear of a policy letter, the 3 golden rules of handling auditors?
That sounds familiar to me. You'll probably have to remind me a little bit about it, though. But yes, it does sound familiar to me.
Yeah, it's it was composed of 3 rules, and actually, it's ironic that I picked this for a topic to call you with, because kind of baked into it is halfway intolerant stuff disguised as maybe some tolerance. So the 3 rules were, the first one is never fail to find and point out an actual goof and send the auditor to training.
Yep. Yeah, I'm remembering this. Yeah, this is red on white. Yeah, what are the other 2?
Never harass or invalidate an auditor for a correct action or when no tech goof has occurred. That's number 2.
Yep.
And number 3, always recognize a perfect tech session.
Yeah,
so
that's right. I remember those. Yeah.
Now, how much experience did you have firsthand with this?
Quite a bit, actually, because I ran auditors in the auditors work in a unit called the Hubbard Guidance Center, or HGC, and that is probably the most important department of any Scientology service organization, because that's where they make all the money. And I oversaw that work in Santa Barbara and then across the Western United States. So yeah, I had some experience with that.
Okay, so this would have been a policy that you enforced. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, I would have seen to it that would have been utilized. It was more relevant to Division 5, the correction division, than it was to mine, in terms of thinking with it and trying to be conscientious about it. Our view, from my perspective as the what was called the product officer, was get these auditors producing. I don't care what it takes, just get them in session producing now, right? And that was more where I was coming from on things. But from the quality control point of view, this was a important issue from Hubbard, yeah.
Yeah, the thing that struck me about this policy is for each of the 3 items that I just read off, the first word of each item is an all or nothing black and white type of word. You have the first one says never fail to find a screw up. The next one says never harass, and the third one says always recognize.
Yeah, Hubbard did like his absolute statements, didn't he? I mean, Scientology, after all, is the science of certainty. So you get to get away with that.
Yeah, I mean, so, and this sounds great, honestly. When I read it, it was like, wow, always find stuff so that the postulant can come in and have a great auditing session and get some case gains, I guess you call them.
Yeah.
But on the same time, yeah, so that's wonderful. That sounds great. But then just thinking about it for a moment, this is the only word that I could come up with, because I thought about how is it the best way to describe this. And the word that I came up with is fanatical.
Yeah.
Now, do you think that that's an appropriate way to say that?
Yeah, I do. I describe Scientology as fanatical, and certainly the Sea Org as the hardcore fanatics of Scientology. It's a word I use. I think it might be a little bit of a stretch to take that policy and interpret it that way, because it was never my experience that it was used that way in Scientology. However, I'm only referring to that one policy. I certainly saw any number of auditors over the years dragged over the coals, raked over the coals, in violation of those rules, actually. Because that's Scientology.
Yeah, so there you go.
It's a world of contradictions, you know?
Yeah, so in other words, they get flogged for, asking a question improperly or not following correct procedure, right?
That's right. Oh, yeah. The people have been sent to the RPF.
Yeah. Wow.
And you're one of them, aren't you?
That's right. That's right. But because as auditors, because they messed up in auditing, that's not why I went, but that's why a number of people went.
Yeah. See, so this is what I'm talking about. It appears to be fanatical. Now, that could just be my label for it. Over the top. Now, do you have any plans to do any more of your interviews with people who have spent time in any of the derivative organizations or Scientology derivative organizations like EST and, these other peculiar, weird things?
Yeah, I would be happy to. It's kind of, as they come across my plate or as I can find them. But yeah, I would probably talk to some more people from some more squirrel groups. We've done Landmark. I haven't done EST as a thing, and I'd love to talk to somebody who did some EST. That would be interesting.
Wait, that's a squirrel group you call it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. The EST is the king of the squirrel groups as far as Hubbard was concerned. Yeah.
Well, you have to please define what a squirrel group is.
Oh, sorry.
Know what that is.
Of course. I get used to this crap. Okay, it's an offshoot. It's a splinter group. If there's a schism, if there is somebody's thinking that Scientology would be better if it was done the way they think it should be done, or if they want to take certain parts of Scientology and repackage it as something else, that's EST. EST then became Landmark, and that became Landmark Forum, and these things splinter off. So Scientology, like the Protestant denominations, has its own offshoots, and it happens the exact same way it happened with Christian offshoots.
Hey, I've got to tell you something. I knew a woman. This is years ago when I was a younger fella. She was in the Landmark Forum. And she kept telling me, "Oh, you got to come to this. You got to come to this." It was a hard sell. And she made it sound like my life would go from the rather, let's say, mundane existence that it was back then to, a LeBron James style, top of the heap type existence.
Yep.
Over the course of like 3 days.
Yep.
I'm not kidding. She didn't say it in those words. However, that's the way it came across. I'm like, I told her, I'm a regular guy. I'm not that smart. I'm not that attractive. These things are not going to change. No. Boy, is Landmark Forum going to solve all my problems, including my balding head. I say that jokingly, that last one.
Yes.
So,
you're totally right. You were basically proselytized the same way people proselytize Scientology.
Oh, wait, really?
Oh yeah. That's very similar. I've seen people do that. It's not the only way to do it, of course, but that's what it looks like, and that's what it feels like.
Wow.
Yeah.
And can I tell you, she was a friend, nothing romantic involved, and she wouldn't leave it alone. Oh, you got to, because she was hosting one of these seminars, I guess.
Yep.
Landmark Forum. And by the way, I was a broke college student at the time. Still $1,500 for 3 days, and I'd have to take off from my rather low-paying job at the time. I was putting the meager existence together for him. No, she didn't care. She said it's that valuable.
That's right. In fact, did she tell you that it was because you didn't have the $1,500 that you needed to do this?
Yes, actually.
There you go.
Well, I mean, it was heavily implied. If she didn't state it outright, because this was many years ago.
Yep.
If it weren't stated outright, it was going to retrain my mind, you see.
Yes, that's right. Because
And I thought to myself,
you're the one stopping yourself, see?
well, she wasn't as great as she thought she was. Okay, I'll leave it at that because
Yep.
you know, I don't want to be like that. But
Yeah,
I'm just saying, it'd be one thing if it were she were the leader of a large corporation, or she had taken a small business to an international scale. Well, that's somebody who's done some things and figured some things out. I figured, okay, let me listen to that. But no, it was somebody who had failed at life much in the same ways that I had, and as consistently as I had, and have since failed. You know, it's just sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
Yeah, it's just the ups and downs of it.
Yeah, and that's the Landmark Forum. So if you could do something about that, that'd be fantastic. Or do a program about that. I would love to see that. I would love it as much as that wonderful episode of Critical Q&A you did last week that everybody should watch because it's unbelievable.
Yes, thanks you for reminding me of that. That's right. You're the guy. Just in case anybody's wondering, that bonus Q&A episode, this is the guy who sent me all those questions. And they were fun. All right, Travis, thanks, man. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All right, bye-bye. All right. Okay, good, guys. Let's go ahead and start wrapping up because we have gone way over time. Yes, I was I out of Scientology when the AAC was around in Santa Barbara? I got into Scientology when I was 15 years old in 1985, and the AAC was still operating in Santa Barbara. And it was all the rage, and nobody wanted to talk about it, but everybody was talking about it, and it was a real problem. And yes, there are certain Scientology processes, ex-Scientology, to fix your experience with EST. There is what's called an EST correction list, or an EST, a repair list for those who have been involved in EST, I think is what it's called. So yes, it's an auditing process, and if you have been involved in EST, you will not be allowed to do any other Scientology until you get repaired on your EST experience. Yeah. So that is a real thing in Scientology, and don't worry, I have not forgotten at all. We're going to do speed round on this. Pick a card, any card. All right. And
did we do this one before?
I think we did. Okay, good. We did this recently, so let's do a different one.
Yeah.
All right. So here, what's this one?
Groupthink.
Okay. Groupthink. All right. Your bias is groupthink. You let the social dynamics of a group situation override the best outcomes. Now, who of us hasn't done this?
Right.
Right? It's only built into us. Dissent can be uncomfortable, and so often the most confident or first voice will determine group decisions. Try to facilitate objective means of evaluation and critical thinking practices as a group activity. And if you think it's hard to do it yourself, just try to get a group to engage in some critical thinking. It is the challenge of the century. Oh, thank you very much for that, Michael. That was a great super chat. And thank you for that nice comment about our show. We had a real fun time this week. I enjoyed this. We have to get you to front and center another show soon.
Yes.
We'll talk about that.
Okay.
Okay, good, because we do have a couple ideas of how to do that. So, thank you very much, everybody who contributed and everybody who was part of the show here this week in the comments and everything else. Love you guys. Love my critics out there. You guys are awesome. And with that, we will have a Scientology-based podcast tomorrow. I'm going to be talking with Cyprian Ivanov about Scientology and loyalty. I had an interesting hour-long discussion about that. So I think you guys will find that interesting tomorrow. And then critical Q&A on Sunday. All right. Bye, guys.
Good night.